Welcome to this edition of Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. Later in the program, we're going to meet one of the 327 elected officials here in Marin County, Frank Berto, who is president of the board of the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. But first, we're honored to have State Senator Mark Leno with us, who represents Marin and San Francisco in the state Senate, elected in 2008. Prior to that, he served in the Assembly and on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Currently, he is the chair of the Senate Public Safety Committee, and he also serves on Budget, Appropriations, Health, Judiciary, and Labor and Industrial Relations. Larry?
Thank you for joining us, Senator. We're just about to embark on a gubernatorial race. Whitman, Brown's been around for a while. As I look at Whitman, she looks like Arnold in a different department down at a department store. How do you view that race, and is it important to us?
It's very important to us. The state is in a very challenged situation, as we know. With regard to Jerry Brown, never underestimate him. One savvy man, and experienced, knows the ins and outs, and I think if we've learned anything from this experiment of Arnold Schwarzenegger over the past 7 years, is we need someone who knows how government works. We need someone who knows both the art and the science of working with a 120-member bicameral legislature. And I would not want to be the corporate candidate in the mood that voters are today with Meg Whitman's Goldman Sachs relations. And I think when unemployment's over 12.5%, people are losing their jobs, their health care, their homes through foreclosure. This is a painful time. And for the voters to be reading and hearing about a candidate who's now spent 80, soon it'll be 100, 120, 150 million dollars, they've got to be thinking, lady, I don't think you know what my life is like. Well, but it's going to be a very contested contest. Those deep pockets can buy a lot of votes.
But can they paper over her inexperience? She claims she'll lay off 40,000 state workers, which would raise unemployment, lead to another recession. Doesn't make sense. She's never even handled a union negotiation. eBay doesn't have any unions.
She's not all that familiar with the ballot box.
Well, yeah, or the state budget.
No.
And certainly, she's an astute businesswoman who knows how to count. But we've been through rounds and rounds of brutal cuts, and to imagine that we can cut further in the state budget under Governor Whitman or Governor Brown seems absolutely incredible to me.
Challenging times. It's going to be a very interesting debate between the two of them, but I would place my bet on Jerry Brown.
So tell us about the budget battle that's shaping up this year, because it's Arnold's last stand. Yes. He is a lame duck. And he has shown that he's willing to break rules and break the law to try to balance the budget. He's used a lot of gimmicks, including federal money that doesn't appear to be on the horizon. What's the Democratic strategy this year for breaking the governor's weak hold over the Republican Party and their no new taxes pledge?
Well, first, let me just lay out what this budget season looks like. The number you'll be reading about in the paper, already has been printed, is about a $19 billion budget deficit. So just a couple years ago, we were about a $100 billion general fund budget. And because of the international fiscal crisis, we have lost 25% of our revenue, just gone right off the top. So that would make us a $75 billion general fund budget with statutory obligations of about $100 billion. So we have been cutting by the tens of billions of dollars over the past few years, and people are beginning to feel it. People know that their public schools are not being funded appropriately, and that is probably the most commonly felt impact of our budget crisis, because so many people are in our public school system. But also our social safety net's been already tattered. So $75 billion, because the legislature, with a 2/3 majority vote last year, did put into place some temporary, just for 2 years, minor tax increases. Not minor, they were worth about $10 billion a year. So that brings us up to about 85. I think the governor's budget is about $84 billion. But $19 billion we don't have to balance it. So to put that 19 in context for you, if we were to, imagine, eliminate our entire higher educational system close every UC campus, close every California State University campus, close every community college campus, fire every professor, every instructor, every assistant, every secretary, every gardener, every security guard, we'd save about 10 billion, and we need to find 19 billion. If we were to let out 170,000 prisoners, close 33 adult prison facilities, 5 youth facilities, and fire 40,000 prison guards, and again, all the secretaries and administrative staff, all the management, just close down the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations, we'd save about $10 billion. So this is not about trimming fat or getting rid of waste, fraud, or abuse. We're talking about the foundation, the infrastructure of the operations of our state government.
Yeah, what I admire about you and a lot of your colleagues is that you go to work in Sacramento every day trying to think of things that are going to help and pass laws that will help me and my family and my people here in Marin on a daily basis. And I was very happy to hear that you had proposed some legislation regarding cell phone admissions. And can you tell us a little bit about how it went, how you thought of it, what happened, and where it stands right now?
So the subject matter we're talking about is the amount of radio frequency radiation that your cell phone and my cell phone emits when it is on in communication with a cell phone tower. It's called the specific absorption rate. The acronym is SAR, and it is measured in watts per kilogram of body tissue. I learned about this when the San Francisco Department of the Environment and its commission looked into this subject matter, held some public hearings, reviewed hundreds of different studies, and passed a resolution, the commission did, urging the mayor of San Francisco and the Board of Supervisors to enact a local ordinance which would require that the specific absorption rate, the amount of radiation that the cell phone emits, be disclosed to the consumer at the point of purchase, right next to the purchase price, both in a retail establishment and online. Now, interestingly, given that the federal government placed a limit on the amount of SAR that can be emitted to be sold in this country. So of course, and that's 1.6 watts per kilogram of tissue. That's the SAR. So every cell phone sold in this country is below 1.6. This is 15-year-old science, and cell phones didn't look like they do today. Imagine what the cell phone looked like in 1996. You didn't keep it in your pocket, you didn't keep it to your head all day, and teenagers weren't using them like they are either. So the federal government should revisit the science, but that's not in my purview. The point is, wouldn't you want to know what your SAR is? Now, the industry will say, the science is inconclusive. My response is no, the science is conclusive. In 1996, the federal government said anything above 1.6 is potentially dangerous. If there were no limit, if there were no issue, there'd be no limit. So there's an issue. So we just want to have this disclosure.
So all you want to do is have the companies print it on the box, so if the consumer is curious about it, she or he can look at the box and say 1.3, 1.5,
Right.
doesn't change.
Like the nutrition disclosures in food products.
It's very similar.
But
very
tell us a
similar.
little bit about how you've had to dial back or water down
Sure.
this legislation, and still you can't get it out of committee.
So the Board of Supervisors is moving forward with its mayor's legislation, so this is not going to be a board-mayor battle. And it was about to be voted on the floor, and then one of the supervisors, Michaela Alioto-Pierre, wanted some more information, so they put it over for a couple weeks. I think they will be voting for it. The votes are there, and the mayor wants to sign it. So the city asked me if I would consider authoring a statewide bill that would impose this across the state. And the more I looked into it, the more I was interested in doing it. And what really sold me on this was that the Federal Communications Commission, if you go to the FCC's website, it has 5 precautionary suggestions for safe cell phone use. My federal government's telling me how I can more safely use my cell phone. They suggest that you use earplugs rather than put the phone to your brain. Use the speaker mode, which I do. I do not put the cell phone to my brain anymore. To text as often as you can. That when you're carrying them near your body, turn them off. And the 5th suggestion is buy a low SAR phone. So the federal government's telling me to buy a low SAR phone, but there's no requirement to disclose it to the consumer. Of course, the manufacturer must disclose it to the federal government, but there's no requirement that they disclose it to the consumer.
So this bill that you had died.
It got out of committee, but there were not sufficient votes on the Senate floor. Now, some of my colleagues told me they were concerned this was an imposition on retailers, and there's some prepackaged phones and just complications. I said, we'll make it easy on you. We'll drop the retail requirement altogether, just for the purposes of those who go shopping online. Would there be disclosure of the SAR? And why I was happy to do that was I know it's a new subject matter. The industry is heavily lobbying against this, and it's a powerful industry. And they're telling my colleagues there's nothing to worry about. This is bad for business. It's going to harm us as we're coming out of this recovery, out of this recession.
And aren't they a major source of campaign contributions?
That is true. That is true. They're a power player in Sacramento. But I just want to get this conversation started because I think the more that people learn about this, many will be interested in just having the information provided to them. And this is about the biggest health experiment we've had on the planet's history. 300 million Americans are using these phones daily. 4 billion human beings walking this planet have got one of these to their head every day. And I can't tell you, I know for certain there is a link between it and cancers that are now being experienced right where the phone is placed. So there seems to be some anecdotal information. We've got them, but we have no information certainly that over the long term, for 10 years or more of daily use, that is perfectly safe. Yeah. So let the consumer be informed and make his or her own decision. So I amended the bill to just have the requirement online. There was still not sufficient votes. I told my colleagues, this is not an issue that's going away. We'll be back.
Good, and I thank you for taking the charge on that. I want to ask you about one of the, we recently had an election.
Yes.
And we're going to be changing the way we have elections in California come real soon.
Prop 14.
Prop 14.
Yes.
Proposition calling for what they're calling an open primary. What does that mean?
It's really a top 2 runoff. And the supposition here is that in our partisan primary system, Republicans have to run as far to the right as they can to get their party's nomination. Democrats have to run as far to the left as they can. And then in gerrymandered districts, which are almost all Republican or all Democratic, with minor oppositional party registration, that we get very far right-wing Republicans elected and very far left-wing Democrats who get elected, and that's the reason we have discord in Sacramento and that we are dysfunctional. I don't necessarily buy into the supposition to begin with, the premise of Prop 14. So what it would do—
I think they're more far right than far left, to be frank.
I would agree with you. And for example, anyone who is declined to state, not in a registered party, can, in a Democratic party, in a Democratic primary, request a Democratic Party ballot, and they can get it. Republicans don't allow declined estates to vote in their primary. So I would make the point that Democrats are already moderated in the current system. The Republicans are not, and I know this is a very partisan comment to say, but I'm a partisan Democrat, that we do elect rather far right-wing Republicans. That's where the problem is. They all sign pledges that they'll never vote for a tax. I don't sign a pledge that says I'll never vote for a cut, though you can imagine a lot of our friends, people I advocate for, do want me to sign a pledge. I will not vote for any budget that makes any further cuts to education. Education's 50% of our budget. That would be irresponsible of me. I want to please the Education Coalition, but it would be irresponsible. I would be abrogating my legislative duties to sign anybody's pledge. And we don't do that. They do.
Senator, the other variable
So I should
here—
finish up on the Prop 14. So
No,
what it does—
that's where I want to go.
Okay,
The
go
known
ahead.
unknown here
Yeah.
is that we're going to be redistricting with an untested citizen panel.
Yes.
And so we have 2 new variables here,
Yes.
a top 2 primary and an unknown of how the district maps will be drawn. So this creates a potential for a lot of confusion.
There's a lot of unknowns. Now, we'll have one primary with Prop 14 implemented. One primary. Candidates will not even be required to list their party registration. Right. So a Republican running in a Democratic district wouldn't have to reveal that he or she is Republican. And Republicans and Democrats and everybody else, minor parties and declined states, will all vote in that one primary. For example, though, in the most recent election for U.S. Senate here in California, Carly and Tom and Chuck DeVore would not have just been running against each other. Barbara Boxer would have been in the mix as well, and everyone would have had the opportunity to vote for any one of those candidates and some of the lesser candidates as well. Now, it would have very much changed the nature of that debate. They all would not have been bashing on immigrants because everyone would have had a chance to vote for those candidates. So there is a curiosity about it, but in the legislative races, I have concern that what this really, well, first of all, in areas around the Bay, you'll only see 2 Democrats on the November ballot. And that's why the Greens and the Independents and the Peace and Freedom and all of the minor parties are rightfully outraged that there'll never be a candidate from those parties on a general election ballot. So it really changes the nature of our democracy in a significant way.
It strikes me that it could be a little bit more nefarious as well, because if you have 2 Democrats, for example, the corporate interests come in onto the more conservative candidate, yes, thereby precluding progressives from actually getting a seat when most people think, oh, a Democrat's a Democrat. And
yes,
as you know and I know, our party, or the Democratic Party, is a broad party with lots of different people.
Yes, and look at how this has actually played out. You'll have in many Democratic districts, such as in Marin, 2 Democrats running against each other, 1 more moderate, 1 more progressive, excuse the terminologies for lack of better words.
Sure.
But corporate interests will support one, non-corporate interests will support the other. Millions of dollars will be spent in the June primary. Well, guess what happens in November? The same play is repeated, and millions of more dollars will be spent. We know who's got the deeper pockets, but for those of us who are concerned about all the money, this is just going to ramp up the money even more. What I think is a better solution to the perceived problem of dysfunction in Sacramento would be to have publicly funded campaigns. Unfortunately, that did not pass. That was Prop 15.
Yeah, we voted for millionaires and billionaires and turned down a public financing test scheme.
That would have been a better solution than to really destroying party politics in California.
Senator, you've been a leader in LGBT issues, and I thank you for the Harvey Milk Day legislation.
Thanks, that was very exciting.
Many other issues that you've carried. We still don't know what Judge Walker will rule on Proposition 8.
Yes.
If he upholds Proposition 8, do you expect an initiative for marriage equality in 2012?
Well, irrespective of Judge Walker's decision, the matter will continue to proceed in the courts, because if the proponents of Prop 8 win, there will be an appeal. If the opponents of Prop 8 win, there will be an appeal. And it could conceivably, within some years, it would take many, reach the United States Supreme Court. And the question is the constitutionality of denying marriage licenses to a group of law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. We already know that the California Supreme Court, when it ended the ban on interracial marriage way back in 1948, the first and only state Supreme Court to end that ban, said that marriage is a fundamental right of all citizens. And they said that any legislation infringing upon that fundamental right must be based on more than prejudice and must be free of oppressive discrimination to comply with the constitutional requirements of due process and equal protection under law. Our Supreme Court said it over a half century ago. So Judge Walker will be determining whether there is a reason for the state to discriminate in this fashion. Our California Supreme Court already ruled there is no constitutional basis for this discrimination. With the passage of Prop 8, our Constitution now allows for that discrimination. In Judge Walker's court, we're trying to determine, is this constitutionally sound with regard to the United States Constitution in a federal court? So irrespective of that decision, it will proceed in the courts. Meanwhile, proponents of marriage equality will be gathering signatures within the coming year, and we'll see this on our ballot in 2012. And for the first time in over 30 years of polling on this issue of marriage equality, the Public Policy Institute of California has a poll now that shows 50% of Californians support marriage equality, 41 oppose.
Senator, with 30 seconds
Sure.
remaining, if Gavin Newsom is elected lieutenant governor,
Yes.
are you interested in being appointed mayor of San Francisco, and/or would you run for the succeeding term?
There was a poll by the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce which looked at 9 electeds in San Francisco, and I came out on top of that poll. So I'm being asked this question a lot. I'm not about to start a campaign. I'm focused on my work representing San Francisco, Marin, and Sonoma counties in the state Senate. Should Gavin Newsom be elected lieutenant governor, I think he very likely will. To fill out his last year, calendar year of 2011, it'll be in the hands of the Board of Supervisors. So they will know better than us who will be the next mayor of San Francisco.
Senator Mark Leno, thank you so much for joining us at Marin Voices and Views.
I hope you'll ask me back.
We
It's
certainly
always
will.
great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like to welcome Frank Berto to Marin Voices and Views. Frank is the president of Sleepy Hollow Fire Prevention District. He's been living here in Marin County for 53 years with his wife and has worked for Chevron for about 30 years before he retired from the oil industry. For the past 28 years, he's been on the board of the Sleepy Hollow Fire Prevention District, which is an elected position here in Marin County. Peter, we are on target because Frank,
Big news breaking.
big news. Frank was selected to be on our show last month, and just this month, the biggest news in the past 28 years occurred at Sleepy Hollow. What happened, and what does it mean to the people over there?
Well, all of these years, Sleepy Hollow has had a contract with the town of San Anselmo where we paid them money, which we collect in taxes from Marin County, and they provided fire protection through the Ross Valley Fire Department. We decided 7.5 years ago to see if we couldn't be a real member of the Ross Valley Fire Department and get a vote on the Ross Valley Fire Department.
Well, you got the sweatshirt. You're already on there, right?
No, that's because the firemen like me. So that one failed. Basically, the thought of Little Sleepy Hollow having the tie-breaking vote on the Sleepy Hollow, on the Ross Valley Fire Department, wasn't acceptable to Fairfax. So time marched on, and about 2.5 years ago, smart people on the San Anselmo and Fairfax Council got together and said, how could we get more money out of rich Sleepy Hollow?
Because you're sitting on a pile of cash over there.
Well, you don't want to talk about that.
We
So-
do, you don't.
No, the point on the cash is that we were always under the threat from San Anselmo to cut off our fire protection. And that's the big thing. We no longer operate under a contract from San Anselmo, which can be abrogated by San Anselmo at their pleasure. We are a full voting member of the Ross Valley Fire Department.
So this has now empowered your community to have a voice in the protection it needs and to move forward in a more efficient way in fire prevention?
Absolutely. And it ends what has been a not particularly pleasant relationship, a landlord-tenant kind of relationship between Sleepy Hollow and San Anselmo. Interestingly enough, we're getting 2 votes on the new Joint Powers Authority rather than 1. And people seem to think that whereas 1 vote would be a tiebreaker, 2 votes wouldn't be a tiebreaker. The biggest thing is the fact that the Ross Valley Fire Department has demonstrated that they can get along. San Anselmo and Fairfax can get along. The votes have been almost entirely unanimous, and we expect them to continue to be unanimous.
So, Frank, will this make any difference to the 800 homeowners in the Sleepy Hollow area for either fire or ambulance services?
Not a bit. The only thing, they will get exactly the same superlative service from the Ross Valley Fire Department on Butterfield Road, something that I'm very proud of, is that all the ambulances have a trained firefighter paramedic with a 12-lead defibrillator that saves lives. I was on the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority for 24 years since it started, and I fought for this. The name of the game, if your life is going to be saved, it's going to be saved by a fireman. By the time the ambulance gets there, you're either going to make it or you're going to be dead. And that has proved true. We have, honest to goodness, saved 2 or 3 lives since we got the trained firefighter paramedic. You call a fire engine with a fire person and a firefighter paramedic on it, a rescue engine. And all 3 of the stations in the Ross Valley Fire Department are rescue engines.
Well, Frank, we're out of time, but it's great to meet you. Thank you for your service in protecting the people of the Sleepy Hollow area. It's great to meet you, one of the 327 elected officials in Marin County. We're going to meet them all right here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay.
Wasn't it great meeting Frank Berto?
In fact, and he's a worldwide expert on the gear shift thingy on bicycles called the derailleur. He's
3
written
books.
Written books?
3
Wow.
books.
Yeah.
And we met him because we picked him out of the fishbowl pewter.
That's
one of the
right.
327 electeds. Who are we going to meet next time?
Well, let's pick a card here and see.
What do we got?
All right. And the lucky invitee, Jennifer Ranks of the Marin Healthcare District. She's been on my list of people I want to talk to.
Good. Let's bring her in.
That's a winner. Well, join us again next time. And in the meantime, please go to our website at marinvoicesandviews.com. Send an email to your friends and tell them about this exciting new local TV show right here in Marin County. With Larry Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. See you soon.